Every now and then you'll hear somebody say, why do I need to come to church? I can worship just fine at home. And the truth is you can worship just fine at home. In fact, I'd argue for me personally that oftentimes my best times of worship come from putting a Chris Tomlin video on my TV and just letting Chris Tomlin lead me in worship. But you might spend a little time with your group talking about why we come to church, and how would you answer the person that says, I don't need to come to church, I can worship just fine at home? Well, at least three reasons. There'll probably be some more, and you come up with some good ones. But there's at least three reasons why we go to church. One is to worship God. Another is to learn. And even with that one, you might say, well, I can learn just fine at home. I can listen to Charles Stanley, and I can listen to R.C. Sproul, and I can listen to whoever it is I want to listen to, and that'd be true. But there's a third reason to attend church that I want to talk about that today, and that is we are to attend church to encourage one another. In fact, let's look at a classic verse on attending church, and that's Hebrews 10:24 and 25. Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. And let me just pause right there and say that there is a real key to Christian living in that little word, habit. That Christian living, many of the disciplines of the Christian life are merely a function of habit. And you want to encourage your people to take hold of this principle of habit and encourage your people, as I often do, to get in the habit of coming to church. That is to set a goal to come every week for about 3 months. And if they will come to church every week for 3 months, on that 13th week or 14th week, depending on what you count, they're not going to get up that day and say, I wonder if I ought to go to church. And the most godly people in the world come to church, not because they force themselves to come to church, not because they really want to stay home, but they're out of self-discipline, they force themselves. And not even because they rejoiced with those who said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. The most mature believers come to church, as he intimates here, that they come to church out of sheer habit. And much of Christian living is about habit. Now, that's not our main idea here today, but I couldn't help but draw attention to that. As some are in the habit of doing, but sit in rows and watch the same thing on a stage. Is that what it says? Sit in rows and watch the same thing on stage? That's actually not what it says. What the verse actually says is, instead of giving up meeting together, we are to encourage one another. And this is a third reason. There could be some more, but there's a third reason that we ought to come to church. And I want you to try to imagine a church. I want you to try to imagine a small group. I want you to try to imagine a Sunday school class where every single member drives to church that day, drives to group that day, thinking about, I am going to encourage someone else today. I'm going to find someone, and I'm going to listen to someone, and I'm going to hear their story, and I'm going to try to lift them up. And this is God's vision for the church. It is more circles than rows. It looks, our modern conception of a church, when you say go to church, you tend to think of something that looks more or less like a concert, or you think of something that looks more or less like a lecture hall. But when the early church thought about a church, they did not think about something that looked at like a concert or looked like a lecture hall. They thought of something that looked like a family dinner. And they thought of a group of people who gathered together every week for the purpose of encouraging one another. They were participants. They were active members of the body trying to encourage one another. So we want to talk today about how we can be that kind of person. I'm going to back up. This was not actually a part of the assigned text, but I'm going to look at our introduction to Barnabas back in Acts chapter 4, verse 36. Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, I'll show you where that is in just a moment, whom the apostles called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement. I think if we were naming him today, we would call him Mr. Encouragement. You might spend a little time talking about who you have known who could be nicknamed Mr. Encouragement. And he sold a field he owned and bought the money and put it in the apostles' feet. And here's observation number one from this text. Sometimes encouragement is more than hugs and words. It is writing a check. And notice that in the case of Barnabas, it was writing a